Effektiv Altruism at the University of Oslo welcomes you to this taped debate, Man versus Machine, on the topic of artificial intelligence. The debate is performed for a live audience at Frokostkjelleren during the UiO Festival. Artificial intelligence is the computer science field of making machines perform cognitive tasks that until now only humans have been capable of. This has brought light to many discussions. Certainly, AI will be tremendously useful. However, it will not be without its social costs and risks. So in this following segment, Norwegian artificial intelligence researcher Morten Goodwin and Oxford AI safety researcher Haydn Belfield will lend their perspective on various questions about this topic. Here we have Morten Goodwin, who will give us a quick introduction to artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, or AI, is software that can run on anything from computers to robots. In traditional software development, without using AI, the programmers need to specify every detailed instruction. They need to specify instruction 1 and instruction 2 and instruction 3, and then if something happens, instruction 4 and 5. And mostly every software is written in this way. However, if you want to use artificial intelligence, this way of doing things is not needed. AI learns automatically either from an environment or from examples. So instead of explicitly writing everything a program has to do, artificial intelligence learns trends in the data. So an example would be a software that can detect cancer cells from an X-ray image. So let's say you want to do this in a traditional way. You need to specify every possible way a cancer cell could look like from an image. This is a very tedious task, if not impossible in practice. If you want to use artificial intelligence, you instead feed a lot of examples of X-rays that contain cancer cells and X-rays that do not. And the AI would then automatically learn representations of cancer cells from the images. And it turns out that this way of doing this, this way of using AI, is extremely powerful. Just given enough data and given enough computer power, AI can learn very complex trends far beyond what is possible to achieve without AI.
And now, the moderator, Marit Simonsen, who is a journalist and a member of the Norwegian National Research Ethics Committees, has just asked Haydn Belfield to give us a brief introduction to existential risk.
Right, that's an existential risk, right? Something that would permanently and drastically affect your potential, and the potential of your species. So what we're worried about is I'm using this disco ball. What's like that disco? What's the asteroid? Are there things currently that pose that level of risk to us? And so asteroids, we've actually done a lot of lots of looking at telescopes and stuff, and it's not actually that big of a risk. But obviously people will be familiar with nuclear war, and people will be familiar with climate change. Both of these, in the most extreme scenarios, could sort of make humanity extinct. But then in the last sort of 10 years, as progress has increased in sort of two areas, biotechnology and artificial intelligence, there's been sort of growing concern about those two things. So for biotechnology, it seems pretty clear, right? You could make some virus that's much more deadly than anything that exists in nature, and that would be, there's all kinds of risks there. And then, but the worry with AI is a bit more. It takes a bit more of nuclear war, climate change, diseases. That's all you can understand that, and then the AI one takes a bit more of a leap. It all starts with this idea of superintelligence. Think of a gorilla, right? A gorilla is stronger than us in any way. A gorilla could beat anyone here. If there was a gorilla in the room, it could probably take all of us at once, right? And yet, so the gorilla is stronger, but we dominate the gorilla entirely, right? There's a few of them living in the world. They live in zoos. Why is that? Because we're smarter. So the worry is, once you have if we create something that is more capable than us, that's smarter than us, and we're not able to control it, and we're not able to make it behave in ways that are aligned with our values, then we might be sort of the gorilla in that scenario. And so that's the overall view. But yeah, maybe we should get a bit more into.
Yeah, so that's definitely a risk, but I think it's a very small risk, because in my head, artificial intelligence, that is a tool, and it's a very, very powerful tool, but it's nothing more than a tool, and it can make decisions, and it can probably make decisions better than us in many ways. But the same way, for example, my pocket calculator is better at me at multiplication, but I'm not afraid of the pocket calculator for that reason. And there are many things that artificial intelligence would be better and already is better than us at. One is driving car, but I'm not afraid of it for that reason. And there's so there is a risk that it becomes smarter than us in every aspect. It could be, but I think that's a very small risk, because we use it as a tool, and as any other tool, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad things, but it's essentially a tool. And the risk is not that AI becomes super powerful and that we become the gorilla, but it's that it comes into the wrong hands. So if something like some crazy person that runs the country gets access to artificial intelligence that could wipe out or use it for some bad things, that's the risk. It's not that the AI controls us or something like this, I believe.
So we're talking about kind of threats, and if we just sort of think about individual robots, like killer robots or anything like that, what are the options for controlling them? How can we sort of retain the function of their utility without them being dangerous to us?
So the way many AI works in a way that they look for reward. So this robot would have something called a reward function or a utility function, and that's the only purpose of the robot or the AI. And utility function or reward function could be, for example, for a robot to sort boxes. And if you say, robot, could you please sort these boxes, take them from a car and put them in a warehouse, for example, it's something that a robot would do. The reward function or utility function would be maybe number of boxes. So if it sorts 100 boxes, it gets a reward of 100. And if it sorts very few boxes, it gets less reward. So the only thing the robot will do is try to sort as many boxes as possible, because this gives them as much reward as possible. So it's in the same way, the way we train a dog, we say to the dog, very good dog, if it does the trick, we're trying to train it, and if it doesn't do, we say bad dog, bad dog. And this is the same way you train artificial intelligence. And it only looks for the reward, and that's everything it does. And if you think, then you can just make a red button to stop it, for example. But that turns out to be very difficult, because if it only looks for the reward, and the reward is only based on the number of boxes, we'll try to stop you from hitting the red button. So today we have robots, and we can just pull the plug, or we can take out the battery. But if the robot has possibilities to do almost anything, it can explore any possibility, it will then try to prevent you from him getting the reward. So anything that prevents him from getting the reward, he will stop. So he will stop you from trying to push the button. It turns out that this is a very difficult problem. Intuitively it sounds easy, because it's just a red button, press it, stop it. And you would also think that,
when we talk to politicians, they always just say, we'll just plug, right? And then you have to worry about it. Yeah,
that's true. But you can think of it in one way. You can think of the internet, for example. So let's say that we as a society now decided to turn off internet because it's bad for us. You and decided that. So I don't think they will, but let's say they decided. And that will be very difficult now. So that will be very hard. But let's say 20 years ahead, let's say we turn off artificial intelligence. I think that would be very difficult. And it's not only robots, like physical robots. Most of artificial intelligence is just software running somewhere on a server or a computer or on multiple servers.
Yeah, so do you think that this kind of fail-safe, or the problem we have with fail-safes making that in this scale, does that pose an existential risk?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of problems with so all the difficulties that we have with current machine learning systems are generally scale. But so if we just take a step back, I'll just lay out the reasons there's 5 steps to this argument, and then we'll see what step you sort of get off the train. So the first one is just that it might be possible to create a super intelligent machine. And you seem to be on board.
Yeah.
The second one is it might happen sometime this century.
I like it.
Yeah, maybe. So if it did happen this century, it might be it would be a very important event. It might be the most important event in human history.
Right. Yeah.
You're on board with that? Okay. So then if it's the most important event in human history, it might be very good because it's better than us inventing new technologies or it's solving medical problems or something. But there is also some risk associated with it. And then the fifth step is there are things that we can do now that would help reduce, even if it's a small risk, reduce that risk. So what step of that are you?
I'm not sure. So I think the problem is that I don't believe that there's a super intelligence that can do absolutely everything.
Sure.
I think the intelligence we see is at specific things. So the same way that pocket calculator is good at mathematics. So we will have artificial intelligence that is good at art. I believe that's artificial intelligence that is medical diagnosis. But I think there's some things that we will not be able to do that the artificial intelligence do. Maybe politics will be something that's difficult for an artificial intelligence to do. In those situations, it will probably be more like a decision support system. We get the artificial intelligence says, the AI says, this is the most decision I think is the smartest. And it will be people who are better at making decisions in the end. So I think the problem with this scenario is not that we will not reach super intelligence, but I think we will reach super intelligence in some fields, but not every field, I believe.
Right.
So, and even if we reach it in every field, I'm quite confident that we will not battle it out. So it's not like the gorilla example you gave earlier, it's more like that we will grow together with it. The same way that I've now turned off my phone and I feel a little bit naked without it. And I think the same way we will be here with AI. So we will develop and go together with it. So we use AI daily, we use AI if you use Facebook, we use AI if you use Google, and we use AI all the time without maybe even knowing it. And we will go together with the AI all the way.
So I'm sensing a little bit of a schism between you two, and I'm just wondering, how confident are the two of you that the world will remain in its present sort of semi-peaceful state until the end of your lives?
So the end of my life, which is hopefully a long time.
Based on like average lifespan.
Okay, yeah. So I'm quite confident that the world will exist, and if it doesn't exist, it will at least not be because of AI. So AI will help us make the world a better place. I'm confident of that. It will not make the place a worse place. So whether the biosphere or the world or what we know as the world now exists in the future, I think yes. And if it doesn't, it will be a much better world.
How about you?
I certainly hope so. I think it's more likely than not than that I'm on my deathbed and we haven't blown up the world or something. But I don't think that's a reason not to work on these things. So the example we often use is insurance. So you hope that your house isn't going to burn down. You think it probably won't burn down, but you nevertheless buy insurance because that's like the sensible thing to do. That's the the prudent thing to do is to spend a bit of money, just preventing that terrible outcome. So in the same way, most of the money in AI research is going on really useful stuff. It's going as you say, advancing medical technology. Translation is improving incredibly fast. So most of the money will go on that, but we're just saying sort of a small chunk should go on improving safety because there's this long-term outcome that could be very bad. So hopefully is my answer.
As long as it's a small percentage.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm sure that many people in the audience are familiar with the rules of Isaac Asimov for robots. Mm-hmm. And can these be sort of, I'll summarize them first, that a robot may not injure or harm a human being, that the robots must obey orders that are given by humans, except when they conflict with the first rule, and that a robot should protect its own existence as long as it doesn't conflict with the first two rules. What are the hindrances of making a similar system for AI?
So these rules were written for fictional purposes and nothing else. And I think they don't even work in his books, in Asimov's books. So they're not good rules. So, for example, you need to define. So if you say you shouldn't kill or harm humans, you need to define a human. And defining a human is not easy. So it's very easy here because I'm a human, you're a human, this is a table, that's easy. But there are all these borderline cases. So for example, is an unborn child, is that a human? And at what level is it at 12 weeks, which seems to be somehow the decision now, or is it before? What about dead people? Are dead people humans, or maybe not? But what about the first 5 seconds after they've died? Are they then humans? Maybe they are, because then you can do CPR and resuscitate them. So there are all of these levels, and if you talk about biomechanics, you get even more so. So when does a person become a robot? When is he a human? So I think these rules make fun fiction, and I think in practice it makes it very difficult. And it might come back to this red stop button, because you not to harm humans, you would have some sort of mechanism that says stop, not harming humans. And the problem with that is also that even if you get the AI to listen to a red button, if you say that it would then have this as part of its reward function. So if you say that it should not harm humans, and the way we say not harm humans is that it listens to humans, it will then start to more listen to the humans than to actually do its own task. And when a robot tries to get as much reward as possible, sort the boxes as much as it can, and he finds out that he can get just as much reward by just listening to the human and like stopping doing what he does, he will stop organizing the boxes. He will instead just stop doing anything. That's the potential of getting the most reward. So it all comes down to this reward function, which a lot of the AI technology is around, that it will in any case try to maximize the reward function. And these rules are just completely different from all those values.
Yeah, so I think he like came up with these rules precisely so they would conflict in certain ways and be interesting. But what it does get at is this problem of what rules, what values do you give these like very powerful systems. So and that gets to these, I think, sort of the two big problems with these super intelligent systems, if they're possible. So the first is that it's very, well, I guess there's three, right? So the first is that it's very hard to get these systems to reliably do what we want. I mean, I'm sure, are very familiar with this, about you train this algorithm and it's going fine, and then it just encounters something and it just goes off on a tangent, and you're just staring at it saying, why is this not working? So that's maybe fine in some situations, but if it's a very powerful system, then when these things go wrong, they can go wrong in that can cause a lot of damage. So the second problem is then, let's say we're able to fix that, right? We're able to make it do what we want reliably all the time. The second problem is like how do we give it values in such a way that it doesn't do something we don't want to do. And then the third one is the problem of sort of instrumental values, as it's sometimes called. So this is, for any system, there's going to be certain things, no matter what its values are, there's going to be certain things it will want to do, because that enables it to maximize its values, whatever those values are. So, like acquire more resources, or prevent itself from being turned off, right? Because if it acquires more resources, it can get more reward. If it's turned off, it doesn't get its reward. So one way to think about superintelligence, in maybe quite a sort of sensational way, is the world is full of resources that it can use to optimize a thing. So we often talk about a paperclip maximizer. So imagine there's like a paperclip factory, and you're trying to make this paperclip factory super efficient. So what you do is you come up with this great new algorithm and you put it in charge and you just tell it, right, produce as many paperclips as you possibly can. And so what it does, it just expands larger and larger and larger. It starts cutting down trees, and it tries to attack anything that's it's trying to stop it. And maybe if these things are sufficiently capable, as they are looking, they're looking more and more capable every year, then we won't be able to turn it off, or we won't be able to stop it before it causes some big problems.
And the reason there is that it gets the reward based on the number of paperclips. So if you get a lot of paperclips, you get huge reward. And you might even think that the robot would go out and pick up some hits to produce even more paperclips, because that gives him even more reward. So yes, I agree to this, but it's so at the current state, we can control the robots, and I'm sure for a very long time we can control them in many ways. And there are these dilemmas, and there are these examples of situations where you cannot control it, when you get this really stop button problem. And but I think that's it's interesting for debate's sake, but in reality, I think we're far away from that problem.
So I'm definitely I'm not arguing that it's around the corner or tomorrow. I don't think nothing that I'm saying relies on that. Although I would say one thing that we didn't talk about earlier when we were just talking about AI is that it's an incredibly exciting time in AI at the moment. So for the last few years, there's just been a number of long-standing challenges that have just fallen like dominoes. Computers are already better than us at chess, but now they're better than us at this game called Go, which is like, thousands of times more difficult than chess. This is like a major breakthrough. They're better at us at every single Atari game. So if you remember playing Space Invaders when you were a kid, you may have thought you were pretty good. The computer's better at that now than you are. Translating things, it's like there's been this incredible success there. Vision has like dramatically improved. Anyway, so it's loads of breakthroughs are being made. There's a huge amount of money and resources going into the field. So one hand, that's like very exciting. It's great. Hopefully there'll be new inventions, new ways to improve our lives. But yeah, that also shows that these things can happen quicker than we might have thought, or quicker than we might have hoped. So if we're sort of just hurtling along this track that towards this sort of fuzzy question mark that's called superintelligence, we think it's wise to try and see what that might look like, and try and see if there's anything we can do now is that on AI safety research to make when we arrive at that destination a bit safer.
Okay, so I like paper clips.
Yeah.
Yes. And sort of if you operate with a really simplistic view of a human, money is a paperclip, and you do stuff for money, and you get a reward, and you're really happy. But I do a lot of stuff that I don't do for money. I hang out with people, I learn how to play guitar and whatever. And of course, I cultivate relationships with other humans. Is there a way to sort of make the AI have an interest, which is to sort of be friendly or helpful?
Well, so the problem with it is that these systems are very clever, but also very stupid. Like, they are very good at some things, but then if you don't tell it not to do it, like it will just optimize that one thing that it's being told to do. So I think that's the issue there.
Exactly. So your reward function may not be money, but it may be something like happiness. Everything you do is for happiness for some reason. But I read the robot or the AI is exactly this. So it tries to get happiness, and happiness is a big number, a big reward. And whenever you can fake it, or whenever you can make a shortcut, whatever that shortcut is, it's what it will do. So you have these examples of finding the shortest path, and it tries just to go to a building or do some clever things which we intentionally didn't think about, but it was able to do. So,
So when we talk about AI like this, we use words like want, what they want. Can AI become conscious?
So I think that's a hard question, but the answer is yes. So for me, there's different levels of consciousness. So my cell phone I think is conscious now. So I get a text message or some other message on my cell phone, and it knows that it's supposed to stand presented on my phone, not Haydn's phone. So in some sense, it's conscious about itself. So this level, and on some levels, it's not as conscious as me, and it depends on how you define it. So generally speaking, yes, it can become conscious. It depends on how you define it. And yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I think this is like a very philosophically interesting conversation, and it's one that like people have debated for sort of 50. Well, I mean, maybe even Descartes. So yeah, it goes back a long time, but yeah, I don't think it doesn't need to be conscious, right? So it like for whether it causes a danger to us or not doesn't really depend on whether and you know what good it can do for us doesn't really depend on whether it's conscious or not. I mean, yeah.
So for me, there's no principal difference between me being conscious. It's just my brain, and there's some electrons, and there's some chemical in my brain that makes me think that I'm conscious. And there's no principal difference between that and a machine that has some wires and has some neurons that are connected in some way that it thinks it's conscious. So the question is if there's a difference between a simulated consciousness and real consciousness, and I think there is no difference between it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know whether it would like feel pain in the same way that we feel pain, or you know, have an inner life in the same way that we have inner lives.
But pain is also just something that signals to my brain. Yeah. So something in my brain says, you're not feeling pain. Yeah. In the same way we could do with a robot. We can say that if you bang into the wall and hurt yourself, you should not do that. You should not get a reward for doing that. You should get a punishment instead. So this is exactly so we can design it in some way that it gets that it becomes conscious, and I think there is no way of looking at it differently than looking at a person being conscious.
So if it doesn't really depend, or if its goals doesn't really depend on being conscious, or if its danger to us doesn't depend. Recently, Google announced that they've developed an AI that's better capable of training itself more efficiently than humans can. So like, what's the significance of that? Does that change anything? Does that...
So this research Google did, it got a lot of attention. And I think the reason it got a lot of attention is clever marketing and all this. So it will be a small step towards a general AI, but only a small step. So what they did was, when you develop an AI algorithm, it's a specific type of algorithm which is called a deep learning algorithm, and it has a lot of parameters. So it means it's how deep you make it, and all of these things. And what Google did was to make an AI decide all of these parameters. And that's people have done it before. Google did it a bit more cleverly. But it's just a very, very small step towards this.
But the specific reason it got so much attention, and it's like the reason people maybe were concerned about it is because there's this concept of, it's called an intelligence explosion. So the idea is that machine learning AI systems are going to improve like that, and then at some point they're going to be able to design a better version of themselves, right? And then the better version of it is able to design a better version of itself, and so on and so on and so on. And so maybe improvement sort of, I can't do it that way. So improvement goes like that, and then it suddenly goes, and that can happen very fast, right? Maybe in years. Some people have even talked about that happening in months, and sort of, so it's down here. We're not concerned about it. It's like the intelligence of like a toddler, or the intelligence of a dog or something, but then it's able to like improve itself really quickly, and then it doesn't spend sort of years at human level where we might be able to reason with it and control it. It just goes straight to super intelligent, and that happens so quickly that we're not able to figure out how to control it. We're not able to figure out how to give it good values, and we're not able to figure out how to stop it, just using all of our resources. And, so that's why this self-improvement thing is such a, got a lot of people. But I agree that the specifics of this one are not.
Yeah, so another thing Google did was that they did an AI that didn't output a solution. So most AIs outputs a solution. So they find the shortest way, or they say this is cancer, this is not cancer, if they do medical diagnosis. But what Google did, they had an algorithm that outputted an algorithm. So this is more in the line of what we're thinking. So this is a bigger step towards general AI. So while most AI techniques, they solve a specific solution, and it is then a weak AI because it can only solve this specific solution. So what Google did is have an algorithm that can output a new algorithm in a very clever way, but that's maybe the potential steps towards a general AI. It's not the research you're talking about that it trains it, but it outputs something different. And this one should have gotten a lot more media attention than the training or just defining the number. Because it's like 80 doesn't fit, no. 70 doesn't 5 doesn't fit, no. 60 doesn't fit, no. That's the invention.
You mentioned Go, and I read that when the AI was playing the game of Go, it had some moves that seemed very bad, and all the humans were chuckling like, ha ha ha, the AI is so silly, it doesn't really work. But then it turned out that in the long run it was a good move, and that the limited human reasoning was just not able to see this long-term goal. And if we reach this kind of super intelligence, could it be that it sort of has goals that we don't recognize? Can it sort of come up with new ideas, new strategies about what it's trying to do?
So, I mean, what that's an example of is when you were saying earlier about just sort of crashing through the wall because that's the quickest way. Like it will because it doesn't have a brain like we have a brain, doesn't think like the way a human doesn't think like the way a human thinks. It can think of ways to get to its solution that we would not have been able to prepare for, we wouldn't have been able, and we might not want, right, if going through the wall. So that that's the worry of it. But the thing about so AlphaGo really was this real breakthrough. So before so it's run by this company called DeepMind in London, England. And before they played this game against the I think it was the 5th biggest player in the world, Korean guy, and everyone was saying he's going to crush this computer. It's 10 or 20 years away because this game is so complicated. But the game beat him 4-5, and then and recently it's gotten even better, right? So the way it works is it plays games against itself, and because it's able to play it so quickly, it learns a lot, and so it's played I think certainly tens of thousands of games, if not hundreds of thousands of games against itself. So anyway, and so it beat recently the number 1 in the world, and he said something like. We've only ever touched we've only been on the seashore of the ocean that is Go, and this machine is showing us that the game of Go is so much broader than we ever knew. So yeah, it's able to come up with all these different ways that we would never think of because it is more powerful and it thinks in different ways, and it might do that in such a way that is that we would not want to. That might lead it to act in ways that we would not want it to.
Yeah. There's an interesting aspect there, and is that DeepMind, which is owned by Google. And what they did was first they tried to train it on existing Go games by humans, and it turned out that this was not a viable solution. It didn't become good enough. And when they started to play against another AI, that's when it became powerful. And this is. Strange to think about that you have to have an AI that plays against another AI just to get training data for the third AI. So that's the entire purpose. And then that's when it became powerful. So this is something to think about, that we need an AI to train an AI to become powerful enough. It's not good enough to get training data, examples from humans. We need an AI to also do that. And that's the breakthrough that they did.
So it might seem a bit weird to people why they're playing all these games, right? Why aren't we putting it to more useful tasks? So the purpose of DeepMind, the vision statement that's on the website, is literally to solve knowledge. Yeah. So they are specifically trying to get this general algorithm. So at the moment, what we've been talking about are weak or narrow ones that are good at one thing, and what it's trying to do is that general thing.
So games are very good at testing AI because there is very fixed boundaries. So there's very fixed rules and very fixed boundaries. But and it turns out that these same algorithms that they use for DeepMind can be used for much more complex things, like driving a car or doing all these things that we see that AI is able to do. So games is just a very good way of testing it, and this is why Google is focusing on Go and.
So you talk about like that there is some kind of risk in this, but what kind of threats are these? Like, what can the internet or what can like a conscious superintelligence do to us?
Yeah, so well, we don't really know. So the worry is more this general worry that we're creating this thing. But so I mean, I'll give you some examples from this sort of narrow range. So already, like most of the financial transactions in the stock market are they're largely automated. So no one's actually sort of calling and shouting and doing weird hand signs anymore. It's almost all done by computers. And great, because they're able to be much quicker, but that means you have these things. So there was this thing a few years ago called the flash crash, where the sort of stock price is ticking along like here, and then it went shooting down, and then back up, and went back along. And the thing is, no one has, still to this day, really knows why it did that, because you've got this incredibly complex system of all these different algorithms interacting. So we don't understand why one of these algorithms, we might not understand why one of these algorithms makes a buy or sell decision. So trying to understand how they all interact with one another, very complex. So to expand that, you might be worried about if we automate more and more of our economy, of our transport system, that seems to be the way it's going, more and more of our investment decisions, financial decisions, more and more of our military decisions, we're giving them over to to potentially autonomous systems. So we're giving all of these powers over to these systems and there's worries there. But the general worry of superintelligence is just that we're creating this. It will be several people. Lots and lots of people have said this would be the most important moment in human history, right? Will this happen, if it's possible? It will be a shift to us no longer being the most intelligent species on the planet, to no longer being the dominant force, to no longer being the smartest, the people who are able to call the shots, because this thing will be smarter than, this thing could be smarter than everyone in the world combined. It could be, the greatest physicist since Einstein, the greatest artist since Picasso. It could be incredibly capable. And then the worry is, we already know that getting it to do what we want, working out how to tell it what we want, working out what we want, working out how to tell it what we want, and stopping it from just cutting corners and harming people, we know that that's difficult. So the worry is that it's going to be even more difficult when it's smarter than us.
But the potential, so there is a potential.
Oh yeah.
But the potential
very cool.
is much greater. So the potential of having the greatest physicist since Albert Einstein is a good example. So so if we can get the AI to potentially do this, and potentially do a lot of things that we're not able to do today, then it's the benefit outweighs the risk by far in my opinion. So we can focus on the risk, and we can tell this audience to be very afraid of this big AI thing, but that's not the story we should tell. We should tell the story that AI is a benefit, it's a good thing for all of humanity in the future.
I agree with that. Yeah. I definitely agree that it's going to give us incredible benefits over the next few decades, and if we were able to come up with this superintelligence, it would be, hopefully, if we're able to get it right, then it will be incredibly good. But it's the if we get it right thing. And there are things that we can do now. So in terms of, there's technical research that some of my colleagues do that we can advance to try and solve some of these problems. There's policy questions, which are a bit more of the stuff that I work on, which is, let's say there's several different companies all trying to reach this goal of superintelligence. Do they get stuck into an arms race with one another where they skimp out on doing the safety research? How can you solve those? So I agree with you. There will be hopefully enormous benefits, but it's if we get it right. And at the moment, I think we're not there, and hopefully we will.
But you can draw parallel to history. For example, when you say the steam power machine, it was an enormous benefit to production. But it also had problems. People died in steam machines, and I think it's the same here. So you have this machine, this technique, this algorithm that is so powerful and can do so much, and there's like a little bit of risk in certain situations, but it's the risk of like blowing up the entire world or crashing all of the economy with us being able to stop it. That risk is, in my head, very, very, very low.
To me, it kind of comes back to this, it's kind of analogous to the Go game where the computers seem to make unbeneficial moves. Because if we are able to create some kind of intelligence that actually is able to care for humans or care about human well-being in a sort of utilitarian sense, maybe even account for the environment, maybe has a better understanding of how to sort of curate the world in a more beneficial way. I think sort of the largest hindrance is, can we trust it, and are we able to trust it?
So at least we can trust it more than we trust humans.
Yeah, we've not got the best track record on this.
So, and if you look at the very practical things, so for example, diagnosis system. So when a diagnosis system is more accurate with an AI than with a medical doctor, it's better to trust an AI. And car, when AI drives the car, it will be better than us. And so to answer your question, if we can trust it, yes, and at least better than humans.
So yeah, if we can trust it, and it's that if that I'm concerned about.
How big is that if in your mind?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, the argument is that can be, maybe it's 90% likely that everything goes fine, and we invent this super intelligent machine, and then everything's great, and it just does everything for us, and we're able to just like jet ski all of our lives, and we just have a great time. So yeah, maybe it's like 90% likely that superintelligence solves all these problems and it's wonderful. But that 10%, that's it. And it's not just that's it for us. That's it for all future generations. So that's it for the future trillions and trillions of people that could live on the world. And and it's worth spending a bit of time. It's worth spending a bit of money. It's worth being a bit cautious about that small risk of disaster, because we already do this. We do this with insurance in our everyday lives. We do this in governments as a whole. Put a lot of work into avoiding these like very small outcomes of big disasters. So we should be just being cautious and sensible, and get all the benefits, but be careful about that one little small risk.
10% is a big number. It must be.
Oh yeah.
How big do you think it is?
I think it's much smaller. So let's say at least significantly less than 1% that it is. And 1% is maybe like 0.0001 or something like that.
Okay. We're going to turn out to the audience for some questions if you have any. But before that, I just want to pull it back a little bit as well and ask, what about threats towards like social political structure, unemployment, political manipulation? Is AI something to be accounted for in that as well? Or sort of how serious are the threats from that?
From unemployment, so in unemployment there's a threat because AI is able to do all of these tasks which is part of our daily life. But for like a taxi driver, for example, he will be unemployed in a few years, no question asked. But for most tasks, for most jobs, it will be a process of automation, automating part of it. So the same way when medical doctors got X-ray machines, it was not so that the medical doctor disappeared because of that. It just got a tool that was very, very good. And for most of our jobs, this is the case. And for most of us here, the problem is that we have too much to do, not too little to do. And that an AI comes and automates large part of my life, automates my grading, for example. I grade students, and AI is able to grade students better than humans now. The examples of that. And then, so in, let's say, a few years, if I get an AI to do that for me, good, I can spend more time talking to my students, for example, and spending time grading all these tasks.
Yeah, so there's a whole host of interesting questions that are more concerned with sort of the short term and narrow, and specifically this narrow or weak AI. Employment is a great one. It's something that politicians have, gone interested in seeming like the last year or two. So the socialist candidate in France talked about universal basic income, which is where you just give everyone, a certain amount of money to live on. And this has often been talked about, if there's 20 or 40% of the population that aren't just unemployed, they're unemployable, they can't get a job because they haven't got the skills, because all those low-skilled jobs are being just done by computers or robots, then, give them this, so it's something that there's a lot of interest in, increasing interest. That's one aspect. Other aspects are the military use. Whether we should let computer robots take the decision about whether to kill people, drones and so on. But there's issues to do with privacy. There's issues to do with fairness. So often, like we're training these powerful systems that we give a lot of power to on data sets that might be biased in some way. That, so there's been, so there's a whole host of interesting sort of shorter term ones, but we're mostly focused on the.
So I guess we should kind of enjoy this time when there is still room for humans to try and solve those problems. Whereas in about 200 years or something, we'll leave that up to the AI as well.
If you like solving problems, then you can enjoy your time now.
We will open the floor for questions from the audience. Yes, I think it's good if you approach the stage because we have a microphone, or actually he's running back to get it. And there will be a stream, so it's good for you to speak into the microphone. He's coming. There it is.
Hello? Yeah. We are talking about like artificial intelligence as it, like something else. While now we have our phone, which is kind of interacted with us. And how far are we, or how can you think as this implant artificial intelligence as us, and towards like superhuman intelligence, and that also taking over, or being an existential threat like Haydn is talking about? Thank you.
I think to some extent we are there already. So I have a smartwatch that's almost integrated with me. I have a phone that when I put it away, I feel a bit strange. And I have contact lenses which help me see. And all of this, and there's no principal difference between that and operating in a computer chip in my mind. So I think we're already at this stage, and just the fact that technology becomes better doesn't really change. So I think we're already bionic people, if you like, almost.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like gives us even more capability, and then maybe worry about sort of this being monopolized by a small group of people, and our society is becoming even more unequal. So yeah, I think I think it's an exciting time to be alive, right? There's lots of changes happening. It feels like we're on the cusp of a lot of new technologies that are going to change our society and change how we live our lives and what it means for us to be human.
I have a question. Do you think it's possible that super intelligence could ever come to that it starts having its own agenda? Or maybe it has the original agenda that we made it for, but in just some ways that we can't figure out. For instance, climate change. If you have a machine that deals with climate change and its main purpose is to kind of mitigate the effects of it, what if it just says, okay, but humans are responsible for it, so there's no more humans? Or, I mean, would it be possible that a super intelligence becomes so intelligent it's just like, I now have my own thing, like, sorry humans. Thank you.
So the examples you gave was not in my mind, not a change of agenda. So it was just a way to get there. So in that example, it will get reward for reducing the climate change, and it just tries to find the best possible way to get it. And one way could be to eliminate all humans. And that's something we should think about. And this is the red stop button problem.
Yeah.
So is there a way to stop it? And it turns out that even though it seems like a very simple problem, just to make a red button to stop it, it turns out to be a very difficult problem. And the reason is that you cannot really say that an AI should both look for a way to solve climate change and then also listen to humans at the same time, because it will then be a worse robot than one that only tries to solve climate change. And it's a very principled, difficult problem to solve.
Yeah. So there's lots of like kind of sensational, kind of science fiction ways that you can talk about this. So yeah, maybe we tell it to kill all the humans that make climate change, or we say, oh, don't kill the humans, but then it comes up with some clever way that solves this. And people often talk about like when trying to motivate it, they talk about like Sorcerer's Apprentice and how Mickey keeps on cutting this broom in half, and there's more and more, and you can't stop it. Or they talk about genies and how you phrase your wish really carefully, but then nevertheless it blows up in your face. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of sensational things. The paperclip maximizer, where it just like turns everything into the universe into paperclips, is another sort of kind of sensational way of putting it. But I mean, I wouldn't hang it up on like whether you think any one of these scenarios is kind of a bit silly. I think just the overall takeaway is, if we create this thing that's more powerful than us, and it's got these problems that we know of already, then that's like, yeah, there's a risk.
Hi, my name is Berge. I'm from the Norwegian Green Party. And first I have to mention that we already have a policy on that Norway should work on an international ban on autonomous weapon systems. So, I have two short questions. The first is, if you could talk a little bit about the importance of the access to the code itself, and who should own it, who should control it. Is open source an important piece of the puzzle here, or is it okay for some companies to own and control it all? And the second one is, of course, what should politicians do on this issue? Should something be done trying to control it or to steer the... So what should politicians do?
They should give both of us more money to do more research. That's like the standard answer that any academic gives.
So I'd like to say first, since you're from the Green Party, there was an exciting thing that happened to AI not too long ago, and it was that they used AI to reduce the electricity consumption by 40% in a computer arm. So, and it shows an example where AI can be used to solve one of the most difficult problems in the world, and this is the climate change problem. And when it comes to access to code, access to algorithms, yes, I think that's a problem. And we all talk about this, or there's talk of this GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, that are doing the big AI things. And that would be a risk if these are the only companies that have access to AI technology. And it should be an open research platform, and it should be open so that researchers can really contribute, and even if they're part of Google, but also if they're not part of Google. I think it's essential.
Yeah, so there's been this new company set up 2 years ago, called OpenAI, funded mostly by Elon Musk. And yeah, the claim of this company is that society will go better if the benefits of OpenAI and the benefits of AI are spread more broadly. How important, what openness does to safety research is actually a very interesting question, and it's not clear whether it makes it safer or less safer. So maybe if there's sort of 5 different companies and they're all racing towards superintelligence, and then these 2 are leading the pack, but they're like very conscientious about safety, and they share all their stuff openly. These 3 who are not so good on safety catch up. So maybe you want to like limit some things you're publishing. Anyway, this is it's an open question whether But it's an example of how like thinking needs to be done about this right now, because this certainly for the narrow stuff, it's already happening. We're already, people sometimes say, oh, when's this going to come? Is this in 5 years? Then we're already living it. This world that's increasingly being controlled, mediated by these systems. But yeah, this is an example of how we should be thinking more seriously about the implications of AI and how to do it so it actually produces benefits.
Yeah, I'd like to mention something as well, and this is the reason Google and these companies are doing so well is partly because they have access to the algorithm, and partly because they have access to the great minds that develop them, but also partly because they have access to computer power. So AI development is mostly just mathematics, and it turns out that just increasing the number of computers, increasing the number of CPUs, computer brains, if you like, this gives an advantage in research. So the reason Google is doing so well is that they have this huge machine park that nobody else has. So they can test out their algorithms. So that's just as important as access to the code, I think.
So even though artificial intelligence may be unlimited in the future, our time tonight is limited. I'm thinking about whether this disco ball hanging above us is actually an asteroid or just a disco ball. And it seems to me that you both agree that it's probably a disco ball. Just in case, let's not stand under it, and let's have a good night. Thank you so much.
All right. Personally, I think this was a great and inspirational talk, and I'm going to top you in cheesiness and say that you have produced some great verbal boxes of paper clips, and for that, you shall have a reward. So, give some applause while they receive their reward. So, intelligence, it relies on data, and effective altruism needs data. So we appreciate if you fill out the forms that we have distributed in front of you and just leave them at the table. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the festival.